On the behalf of Klein Chemicals Practice, I will be presenting and hosting this webinar today. My name is Nikola Matic. I am a Vice President at Klein. I'm responsible for our syndicated products in the chemicals area. So the reports and the database we publish. I am with Klein for about 15 years now. And during all those 15 years, I've been very closely following the personal care ingredients market. So I hope probably most of you already have seen me in one of trade show or earlier meetings. In today's webinar, we'll be first looking at a very quick introduction to Klein & Company. I'll go through an explanation of what's the scope and methodology we've used in the reports or analysis that we call personal care ingredients. That is the base of this presentation today. And then we will focus on what's the most important part of this presentation, the summary of the key finding of that analysis. Before, in the latest part of this presentation, I'd like to spend a few minutes showing you our new delivery platform. That's a Power BI dashboard that we are very proud of and that I'd really like to show you. So let's get started with an introduction to Klein & Company. So Klein & Company, for those of you who are not familiar, is a market research and management consulting companies. We're active in three main areas, or we're focusing on three main areas that are chemicals, beauty care, beauty products, and energy. And as I said, we're market research products, so we have a market research and a syndicated branch, as well as a management consulting department that's basically leveraging our industry expertise, to get further and to help our partners with projects in strategy and business development, technology and innovation, amongst others. Klein is a global company headquartered in New Jersey, Parsippany, but with 10 offices globally. We have 3 offices in London. I'm actually in Prague, Czech Republic today, which is one of our 3 offices in Europe. We have 4 offices in Asia, 2 in India, 1 in China, 1 in Japan, and we're also present in the Middle East. We're basically present across the globe, and that's very important because it allows us to cover our global market and global market analysis, as is our analysis of the personal care ingredients market, locally, meaning with a deeper understanding of the local situations. So focusing now a bit more on the topic of today's interest and what's important to us is the personal care value chain. And Klein has a truly unique positioning in this value chain because between my group and myself and my colleagues, we are really covering this entire value chain. Today, during this webinar, we'll be looking at the left part of it, and we'll be looking at cutting that value chain between the personal care raw material suppliers and their customers. But at Klein, we do also have the capabilities, and we are analyzing the market further along, this value chain. We're looking at brand owners, but we're also looking at different retail channels as well as consumer trends. Of course, this understanding of value of the entire value chain does help us having a completely holistic approach and analysis of the personal care market. So that's for Klein. I'd like now to give you some information about our personal care ingredients market analysis. That is the product from which all of the facts and figures you'll see further in this presentation during this webinar have been sourced from. So this is what you can see on your screen is the brochure of our latest edition of personal care ingredients. Full name is Personal Care Ingredients Global Market Analysis. It is a product that we have published a few weeks back. with the 2021 base year and forecasts from 2021 to 2026. It is the latest edition, but this is a market that we are analyzing for close to a quarter century now. So this is something that we're looking at closely for a long time. Myself, for 15 years, as I was saying earlier. Of course, the tool has evolved throughout the years as the market has. The scope has evolved, so we're now covering about 250 ingredients that I will, I'll get back to this in my further slides. And also, the geographic coverage has evolved to reach, since our 2015 edition, if I'm not mistaken, a global coverage. Today, we're covering 8 key regions that you can see on this slide and the rest of the world. So truly global coverage, but with a very, very specific regional split. In terms of deliverables, our tool still comes as 2 key deliverables: an interactive database that I'll discuss in a second, but also reports that are actually available through a completely new dashboard that I will show you toward the end of this presentation. So we're speaking about our ingredient scope, having about 250 ingredients. Those ingredients are, split within 10 main product groups that you can see on your screen now. And those groups are covering all key aspects of a personal care product's formulation. So you will see we're covering, antimicrobials, for instance, with what you'd find traditional preservatives. A few examples are here: bronopol, parabens, isothiazolinones, phenoxyethanols. We're having all the key categories. You'll find emollients, you'll find conditioning polymers, you'll find obviously surfactants, rheology modifiers, and we've added throughout the years new product, new ingredients, new categories too. And because we're obviously trying to follow the trends on the industry, and this means for the 2021 edition, for instance, a much improved coverage of preservative boosters, for instance, within that antimicrobial categories, further coverage of natural alternatives. That means, for instance, for surfactants, we've added the fermentation surfactants that are entering increasingly into personal care formulations. We are also looking at more niche ingredients, or ingredients for very specific applications, such as sensory enhancers you'd find in the miscellaneous category. So really, throughout the years that our categories have evolved to follow the market and to stay in touch with this market. I was mentioning the database a few slides back. Just a quick word to explain what's the type of level, that was the type of information that you'd find there, but also what's the level of detail that our database provides. So we have 250 ingredients, obviously, but then each of the market can be split by different fields in the database. And you have a few of them on the screen now. We have you can split the market by ISO 1628 classification, so that's natural, non-natural, derived, natural, by application, haircare, skincare, etc. Formulation type, and the data goes at the level of each of the ingredients down to the supplier level. So you can, for instance, filter out one ingredient, split it out by what's the non-natural, derived, natural for this ingredient, where is the ingredient going in terms of application, formulation type, down to the level of the suppliers. And each of those are filters that can be added or removed depending on the way you want to look at the market. So a last quick word about our deliverables. I just discussed the level of detail you'd find in the database. You have actually a snapshot of this database on the left part of top left part of this screen, where you can see the different deliverables. We have a screenshot of them at least. So our database is a fully interactive database that works like a pivot table online, and then you can see on the top right corner, on the right part of this slide, our interactive report system that I'll show you toward the end of today's presentation. And finally, our totally new analysis dashboard that I will also show you, that allows to see the database in a graphical environment. That's also very helpful to identify trends. What's important to note is that all those online tools are available when you're a subscriber, wherever you are. So there's no limitation in terms of number of people using these tools. These tools give the ability within an organization to collaborate on client platform and to access it, regardless of where you are located. Finally, a last word before getting into the meat of this presentation, a last word about a question that we're often asked when we show the database or our reports is, how do you get to the level of detail you're able to get on a B2B market with information that's not in the public domain? And this slide is the reason, and contains the explanation of how we're able to do that. And I think that that is what makes Klein different in the market research world and in the personal care ingredient world. It's the ability to collect the information that you'll find nowhere else. And this is coming from our focus on primary research. We're conducting a very high number of interviews in each of the regions that we are covering, and interviews that are with suppliers of ingredients. In that case, they're distributors. We're also interviewing end users to understand what are the changing needs from formulators. We're looking at governmental agencies to get an understanding of regulations, trade organizations too. So a very large number of primary research interviews that we couple with information that we got from secondary research, obviously available information. We're speaking about annual reports from various market participants. We're speaking about import-export information. We're speaking about publicly available data and databases. So when we take the results from that secondary research and primary research together, that's what is allowing us to depict the market the way we are at the level of information, at the level of details we're able to provide it. And I believe that was my last slide about the report scope. Now let's get into the summary of key findings. And now starting with a bit of general information about the market we're looking at. So we're looking at personal care ingredients. So even a step back, if we look at the personal care market from a finished products perspective, we're looking at a market today that is worth roughly $500 billion on the retail level. And so if we go a step further and look at ingredients, we would find a market that we estimate altogether at about $25 billion in 2021. That can be split into three categories that I represented here. So first, two categories, so undifferentiated and differentiated. And if you go a bit further and split the differentiated category in two, you'll get three categories that range from commodities down to specialties and active ingredients that we could consider as super specialties. Those markets are relatively different in terms of their drivers, in terms of their growth potential, and the players that are active into them. If we look at, the definition of those segments is always something that's difficult, and we found out throughout the years that the most simple one is that to say that, okay, whatever is sold to specification should be considered as a commodity, and anything that's sold on performance should be considered as a specialty. Now, active ingredients are even, sub-part of that specialty market. They're definitely sold on performance, but on the top of it, it's not a product that's being sold anymore when you look at active ingredient, but it's really the entire concept that suppliers are trying to sell. So now, if you look at those three categories, again, the total is roughly $25 billion. You can see that the more left you go, the more specialty you go, the highest the growth potential will be, the highest the market and customer fragmentation would be, and the highest the service and R&D intensity will be. So today, what I'll be presenting you is a focus on the specialties that we're covering at Klein. We'll not be looking at active ingredients today. This is something that we consider separately because, again, it's a very specific market segment. So all the facts and figures that you will see in the next slides will be related to the blue bar you can see on this screen. And that gives us actually, that's for the 250 ingredients that I was mentioning before. We are looking at a global market that is valued at about $18.6 billion for a volume that's about 5.7 million tons. Those tons are on 100% active level basis. So I'm first looking at this market from a geography standpoint and trying to understand what are the key regions. And first interesting thing to note here is that the volume picture and the value picture are relatively different. Europe remains the largest market both in volume and value, but China has become now the second largest consumer of personal care ingredient in volume terms. US closing the top three. If now you switch and look at the market from a value perspective, China's importance is lesser, and therefore you get back to what we've seen historically, which is Europe and the USA being the top market in value globally, and together representing about half of the global value. Other markets of importance are India, again, that you can, as you can see on this slide, is the top fourth largest consumer of ingredients, but has a very larger volume share than it has value share, which is followed by Southeast Asia, Brazil, Africa, and Japan. We have then a rest of the world that would cover the countries that are not split out here, but you can see that the different size of the countries between volume and value is sometimes very large. That's the case for China, India, but also for Japan, where there's a large import of semi-finished products that are relatively expensive. So now looking at the market, at the same market, we're looking at this 18.6 global billion US dollar market, and looking at it from a product category or an ingredient category perspective. Again, here the pie chart shows the demand in value, but if we were looking volume versus value, we would also see a very different picture. If we were looking at it in volume, we would see that the solvent category, which is an addition to our 2021 scope, is the largest because we are looking at a rather commoditized segment of the market that have definitely taken advantage of. Sorry for that. That have taken advantage of the COVID-19 situation with a huge increase, obviously, in consumption of hand sanitizers, so notably. So the solvents would be the largest volume, the largest product in terms of volume consumption. But The volume view doesn't necessarily make sense when it comes to looking at a market across categories and with categories where the price point is very different. If you look at it in the value perspective, from a value perspective now, you'd see that surfactants, emollients, and conditioning polymer remain the top three categories, with surfactants and emollients being the largest. Emollients, they're used in large quantities, notably in skincare applications, and have been a very dynamic segment throughout the last decade. Surfactants also present in most application in any rinse-off application throughout skincare or hair care. But you can also see that behind those two categories, so we've mentioned conditioning polymers, but there is the other sizable categories. You know, we have rheology control agents, solvents, we have antimicrobials, UV protection. All of those segments are sizable segments and representing relatively large opportunities for ingredient suppliers. So we were looking at the market in 2021 by geography. We're looking at the market by category. Our tool also allows us to look at the market by application. And this is no surprise. Skincare and hair care represent most of sales globally. Actually, 80% plus of the sales are coming from skincare and hair care application. You see that in Klein's definition, body care would go to skincare. Sun care would also go to skincare, making it the largest category, representing almost half of the market. Other large categories are oral care, color cosmetic, and antiperspirant and deodorant. That's the APDO category that you can see on the left-hand side. This is the global split, and then you can see how the split is different from a region to another. One of the interesting things is that skin is, even in large hair care countries like Brazil, for instance, skincare is always the largest application. And here we're looking at value applications. Situation would be slightly different in volume. But so skincare is across the countries that we are covering the leading application, followed by hair care. You can see that hair care is different. It's quite a different situation. And I think the extremes would be Brazil, where hair care is a very large market, and the other side would be Southeast Asia with a much smaller market. Other local specificities include a relatively large part of color cosmetics in India, and you see also a changing oral care value share depending on the country you are looking at. We can also look at the market from an ISO 16028 standard. So this is a standard that has really been important since in the last let's say 5 years, but had become very important in the last 2 years with a very important adoption throughout the industries, where it has actually replaced in many cases certification, some private certification bodies, so to follow this, we have at Klein included this ISO 16028 classification in our database, and looked at now you can look at the demand based on the naturality of this product. So overall, we can see that the market is the market for natural, for what the ISO standard consider as a natural product, is still relatively small, but that derived natural product represents the largest category, and that together derived natural and natural represent roughly 60% of that 18.6 billion market that we're looking at. The rest going to the non-natural that we would have called synthetic in the past, but the standard called those ingredients non-natural. What's important to note actually is that we at Klein have done our own assessment of each of the ingredients we're looking at the level of each supplier, because for a single ingredient, you can have a derived natural versus a non-natural grade, and it is really, we went down to the level of the ingredient and suppliers to make sure that we were picturing the consumption as closely to the reality as possible. On the right side, you can also see that this split by ingredient naturality is different. So obviously from an ingredient category to another, I've taken the examples of three large ingredient category: emollients, surfactants, and rheology control agents, to show you that there's a large part of natural in emollients that's coming notably from all the straight oils, vegetable oils that are being used in that emollient category. And then you can see surfactants, where there's a very large part of derived natural, or very little. I don't think there's actually very close to zero natural product, and the same for rheology control agents, where the non-natural part is slightly larger than for surfactants. And you can also look at this interesting problematic of the ISO 16028 classification and look at the differences between regions. Here I've chosen the emollient categories and showing Europe and USA and China, and the different, and see that the situation is really country specific, and that the database can, help you understand where is the switch to natural more advanced, and where there's more opportunities for derived natural or natural product. So we've looked at the consumption side of things over the last few slides. Let's now look at the supplier side of things. So if we look globally, as we've done so far, we would find out that the market of personal care ingredient is still a very fragmented market, especially if you consider other areas of the specialty chemical industries, and even if the acquisition, merger and acquisition activities were very high over the last decade, we're still today looking at a market where the top 10 suppliers that you can see on your screen for the market we're covering as specialty represent only a bit more than a quarter of the market. Then none of the market participants have more than a 10% market share, and where you can find a variety of companies as well as different type of companies. So I usually like to split the ingredient suppliers in three categories. You'd have the global leaders, that are typically the companies that you see on the very top of the list in terms of size. We're looking at BASF, Dow, Croda. So those are the companies that are present globally, but also that have a wide product portfolio. Then the second bucket, I'd say, would be the product specialists. So in this category, you would still find mostly global players, but that have maybe a bit more focused product portfolio, and where that would have a specialization of their product toward certain part of their product portfolio. You'd find in the top 10, you'd find companies like Momentive, to some extent, Lubrizol or Inospec, sorry, would also fall into categories. Momentive obviously is a conditioning polymer specialist. Lubrizol is a rheology control agent specialist, even if their product portfolio is much larger, but they're seen by the industry as being very strong in this area. So that's the two global leaders, product specialists, and then you have the third bucket that do not appear here. If a lot of those companies would be part of that, and those are the local suppliers. So companies that would be present in one or several ingredient group, but on a specific set of geographies. That would represent really a large part of the 300 players that we have been able to identify in our database. 300 players, or more than 300 players for the database, but we're 300 players having more than $1 million sales of ingredients to the personal care industry. So a very fragmented market. Very fragmented market, and the market that with quite variety in terms of the situations between different categories. I'm just picking a few examples here, showing you that while you can see the same name appearing, we're looking at BSF in antimicrobial, surfactants, UV protection ingredients, but you can see that mostly the names are different from one category to another. And you can see some of the leading suppliers in these categories. You can also see that the difference is coming not only from the name of the participants, but also in the market fragmentation at the category level. You can see, and by that I mean the share and the importance of the key players. So, for instance, conditioning polymers and UV protection ingredients would be the more concentrated markets, where the leading player represents 57 and 56% of the overall market. And then on the other hand, you have markets where the top four, like antimicrobial and surfactants, represent roughly only a third of the overall market. So difference of fragmentation also exists at the ingredient level, or at the ingredient category level. So that was a quick look at the supplier side of things, and we've looked at the picture in 2021, and now let's have a look at understanding what are the trends and what are the drivers that are going to be very important going forward, and that will explain the market dynamics going forward until 2026, which is our forecast period. Starting with maybe the most obvious of all, COVID-19. It has had a profound impact on the market in 2020, profound impact on the market even in 2021 and going forward. Obviously, the market has gone up and down depending on the category you'll be looking at. And what we're expecting going forward is that the segments that were the most strongly affected by the COVID-19 situation, we're looking at color cosmetics, we're looking at sun care products, are also those that will rebound, will rebound the highest among those categories. We're also seeing that the pandemics has changed certain lifestyle habits, and that those changes are expected to stay with us. Of course, we're looking at frequent hand washing and sanitization. So ingredients going into this type of products will definitely continue to take advantage of the situation albeit not at the level it was in 2020 and 2021. And it is also going indirectly to affect positively other type of ingredients, if especially, let's say, emollients, that people will also use more often, on their hand, for instance. So that's for COVID-19. The second, I think, key trend, it's the drive toward natural and sustainable ingredients. This is something that we're seeing for 2 decades now, so it's definitely not coming as a surprise. We might have seen a very slight reduction of the speed of switch toward natural and sustainable ingredients in the last 2 years. But for certain, this was just a very short situation, and now I think the market is picking up and taking back where it was, and that drive toward natural and sustainable ingredient has an effect across the board. So really, with formulators looking at natural and natural derived ingredient and natural alternatives in each of the function of their formulations. I have a few examples here. We're looking at alternatives to traditional preservatives. We're looking at alternatives to silicones. We're looking at the right products in emollients, surfactants. We've seen a lot of new technologies and new ingredients getting on the market. So this is definitely going to continue in the future and will remain a defining trend for ingredients across the next 10 years. Multifunctional ingredient has also been something that we've been seeing quite significantly throughout the years, and that remains a very key property of the market of ingredients today. Notably in I would say in higher value markets, Europe, USA, where a lot of products such as emollients, formulators would be looking for if you can offer anti-oxidizing properties or hydrating properties to your emollients, that's seen as obviously as a plus. We have squalane or hyaluronic acid as examples. When we look at multifunctional, we also look at the finished products actually, and this is some of the trends that existed in the past and that may have been accelerated by the COVID situation, where many consumers have reduced their routine or of daily makeup, and many experts actually expect that in the color cosmetic area, notably, there will be a move toward multifunctionality and emerging of skincare and makeup products that will provide both a skincare benefit and makeup effects. So this is the type of multifunctionality that will be expected both from a finishing product perspective, but also from an ingredient perspective. A few more trends left that again are has been driven by the COVID situation, now continuing due to the situation in Ukraine, which has been the cost increase. Generally, we've seen increase in raw material costs and transportation costs. We've seen very difficult supply chain management issues throughout the last 2 years. That we are absolutely expecting to continue in the foreseeable future. So the cost increase is going to continue affecting the market. But I would say that if you look at the personal care ingredient industry, it is relatively it's a specialty market, and therefore the impact of the increase of commodities and raw material is a bit easier to to handle in these industries than in the specialty chemical industries. I was mentioning just for the cost, the various issues in the supply chain throughout the last 2 years, and it has actually pushed toward the ideas of local supply of ingredients. Shipping was an issue, finding products, ingredients was an issue. So it has actually helped some local suppliers to build a larger place in the local market. This is something we've definitely seen in India, and that's something that we expect will continue as shipping remains an issue, as the high raw material cost, high cost of crude oil will still continue to represent to make the transportation costs grow. We do expect the shift toward local suppliers and the buildup of local champions in the personal care ingredients area, that this is a trend that will continue. And the last one I have here, that's inclusive beauty and natural look, is also something that we've seen as a defining trends in the industries lately, notably in regions such as Europe, and it has obviously had the largest impact in color cosmetics, where we've seen companies offering a wider choice of tints to match type and shade of skins. We've also seen the natural look aspect, again, very important in the makeup area, that we expect to be continuing post-pandemic. And this is valid for color cosmetics, but we're also seeing it true in hair care, for instance, where natural look in hairstyling is an important trend, and actually having a relatively straightforward impact on the market of ingredients, specifically hair fixatives, with a reduced demand. So if we take all those trends together, and if we look forward to the market, we're looking at a market that we expect that Klein will grow on a global basis by a CAGR of 3.4% until 2026. This is a volume growth. Most likely, the value growth will be higher than that for two reasons. First of all, because we were just discussing the price increase. This would definitely have an impact on the growth, but also there's a continuous switch from more commodities towards specialties and higher price product. Nevertheless, we're expecting a 3.4% growth in the ingredients market that will be driven by the recovery from COVID-19. That will be driven widely by the growth in population, notably in Asia. Other drivers are, the naturals that we were looking at, the aging of populations that also lead to a higher demand of specific products, notably anti-aging products, and also driven, as I said, by some of the habits that were acquired during the pandemics and that are here to stay with us. On the other side, we do expect some restraints to the market. We discussed the high price overall, high price that is even more true when we look at performance products, and that's also when we're looking at natural alternatives. We're also looking at a pricing point that in some cases still remains an issue. Regulatory might also be a challenge in some countries and for some specific products. And finally, price sensitivities in markets such as India or Southeast Asia is also something that will continue to slow down the switch towards specialty that we see in other markets. So altogether, I was mentioning a 3.4% growth for the market of personal care ingredients. And now, if we look at it from the different ingredient groups that we're covering, it's important to note that these are global views, so that can hide very specific regional dynamics that can be shown in the database, and also within a group you can have very large difference between. So in surfactants, for instance, there's a very large gap in growth in between the new technology fermentation products and more older workhorse type of product like SLES. But generally speaking, most of the products that we're looking at will be growing between 2 and 4%, except the color cosmetic ingredients, and that's due to two factors actually. One that I was discussing before, which is the fact that it was one of the most negatively impacted segment during the COVID situation, and now we're expecting a rebound to happen. And the second reason behind the high growth for color cosmetic ingredients is that there's a large consumption that's coming from India, especially for dyes, and therefore that market is taking a further advantage of the high growth markets, that high growth percentage that you can see in India. Now the same view, but from a geographical perspective. No surprise here. If you look at the bottom of the list, you would find the more mature market, with Japan just a slightly more than 1% growth expected. Europe, US between 2 and 3%, and then at the other side of the scale, you find the large growth countries. Africa and India are expected to be the highest growth countries, and followed by China, by China and Southeast Asia. So very large part of the growth potential coming from Asia. So that is it for the presentation. We still have a few more minutes. I just wanted to quickly switch toward our new delivery platform that I was mentioning. And this is what I hope you can see on your screens. We're looking at a Power BI platform where in the past, for those of you who have been purchasing our reports, you would have an access to PowerPoint reports. Now those reports are integrated into the interactive platform, and where you could simply navigate by clicking around. So if I look at the regional overview, that's where I would find the different key information for the countries I would select. Let's say I want to understand the Japanese market. I'll just select Japan, and I'd have some macroeconomics, but also summary of consumption with all the key data, but also the qualitative information that you could find. All the key trends would be discussed here. So this was for Japan, and then we have all the categories of the categories that we're discussing. So color cosmetic, conditioning polymers, emollients that we could see here. So let's say I wanted to understand the European market of conditioning polymers. I'd just click select it, and then I'd have an understanding of the average pricing of those ingredients. I would have an understanding of the different trends that are happening at the level of each ingredient. So of course, what I was presenting you was more of the top level, with charts showing the consumption and the explanation just next to it, and of course all the rest of the information. And finally, what is also a very nice addition to our deliverables is this analysis dashboard that you see. So here you have our database, but in an environment that allows you to do different things with different cuts of the data to help you with your analysis of the market. So here, for instance, we're looking at a supplier view where we're comparing suppliers between themselves. With the spider view, looking at what's the share of natural in their portfolio, what's the value sales, what's the potential for growth. how is their portfolio split out in different products. So that's kind of, you know, supplier split. Then we have a product split where we're showing some other charts. It's taking a few seconds to load because I'm hosting the webinar at the same time. We're getting there. Here we go again with the ability, as you do in the database, to filter out. So here we have a global view, but if I wanted to look at Europe only, I'd click at Europe, and now I have the ability to get an understanding of the product attractiveness in that bubble chart, for instance, or who are the suppliers in Europe for and how is their different portfolio being structured. Interesting bubble charts with, you know, CAGR on one side, the market value or the volume on the other, and finally a last cut that is a regional cut that again would show you differences, regional differences, and with the ability to filter out a specific part of the market. So, you know, I could spend a lot of time on this dashboard that we're very proud of, but I'll not spend more about it. We'll be glad to demo to demo it to you and show it if you'd have any if you'd be interested in seeing it live. Please let us know. We have 5 more minutes, so I will try to take a few of your questions. So I have a few questions here that I'll try to, I'm reading out, I'm seeing them live. So let me just try to understand some of those. Okay, one of the questions is, do you have detailed product suppliers and market data for actives? Yes, we do. Thank you for the question. Yes, we do. We have. We just didn't cover them today because we consider the market for active ingredients to be slightly different. You know, if you look at the market participants, they're different. If you look at the products, they're different. If you look at the way to sell these products, they're different. But we do have the same type of level of information for actives than the information I was showing you today. Of course, this is, you know, usually speaking, the active ingredients is a market that's growing faster than the overall specialty ingredients. Of course, faster than the commodity part of the market. So it has always been a very interesting market, and that's the reason why we're covering it separately. Another question here is, what about the growth of natural ingredients versus others? So the database allows you to look at the different markets and the different segments according to their ISO 16928 classification. And I'm trying to recall from the top of my head. I think that if you look at non-natural ingredients, just to give you an idea about the different scale of growth that we're expecting, the non-natural ingredients are growing overall below 3%. The natural derived are just slightly over average, but then the natural, fully natural ingredients are expected to grow at double the rate of those ingredients. I think it's something that is over 7% on a global level. So very large growth and growth potential here, and definitely where the growth is. I think the ISO standard has really helped the market structure and get past some of the, you know, early definition kind of fragmentation that the market could see. And now there is a relative agreement on something that is the definition of the product, and we do expect this to continue. Actually, at Klein, we are preparing totally new products that will be looking at the, you know, the ISO standard only, and that will create a classification of all ingredients on the market, but also not only a classification that will give our expectation in terms of which ingredients is expected to remain in the category it is today. Some ingredients are being under the standard is relatively young and still developing, and some ingredients are changing classification between natural derived to non-natural, for instance, based on the process that are being used. And this is some assessment that we're expecting to publish later this year. I have one more question here that I'm not sure I understand, so I will rather take it offline. But otherwise, I think we caught up with the questions, and we're just in time. So I would like, before ending this presentation, to thank you for your participation. I really hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. If you have any questions, I'm just going to share here my details. Please feel free to contact me. If you have any question on the content of this webinar or on the content of the database and dashboard that I was showing you earlier, please feel free to contact me. If you're going to In Cosmetics, I'll be glad to meet you there, finally, after 2 years. So again, thank you for your participation today, and hope to see you soon.